For the second part of this tutorial, we are going to paint the sketch with watercolor. So I'm going to start by painting with a light color, in this case yellow. I'm going to paint this yellow building in the background. I'm going to mix this yellow with a little bit of orange so that the yellow is not that unnatural. If you look at the photo closely, those yellow shapes are actually square shapes, but I'm going to paint this as a vertical rectangle, and I'm going to separate the yellow later on with the green. Separate the yellow later on with the green horizontal lines. And I want to paint this side as well. This is the side of the building. I'm going to add a little bit more orange to paint this sign here. Next, let's paint this red building here. Make sure you use a lot of red paint. Make sure you use a lot of red paint. You can mix it with a little bit of orange or new gumbosh to create some variety, or you can add a little bit of yellow to it to make the wash look more interesting. The reason we need to use more paint here is because later on we will be drawing the details with the white gel pen. So we need white to contrast with strong red. While you still have red paint on your brush, look for other areas in the scene that has red and paint those areas with the same red. This yellow building is now dry, so now I'm going to mix a green with lemon yellow or Hansa yellow with phthalo blue. This is the green I get, and I'm going to paint the edge of this building with this green. Make sure to leave a gap between this building and this building on the side, because you can see the sky between those two buildings. And I can use this same green to divide the yellow shape. And this green will continue down here at an angle. To suggest the windows on the side of this building, I'm going to mix red into the green. Just mix a tiny bit of red into the green. This will neutralize the green to produce a darker color. So when drawing those tiny little lines, make sure you draw them slowly. Let's draw a line here, which is at an angle. And I'm going to draw a line here, which is at an angle, and then draw the lines in between. This will help you draw the perspective of these lines more accurately, rather than having to draw top to down. Let's paint the sky. So for the sky, I'm going to use ultramarine. Make sure to wash your brush properly first before you pick up the ultramarine. So let's paint the sky. I'm leaving this area white for the clouds. If you want some variation with the sky, you can add some phthalo blue, just a tiny little bit of phthalo blue. So once you have phthalo blue and ultramarine mixed together, you can see some variation in the color. And let's draw some sky here. We can see a little bit of sky here. And some sky here as well. Maybe some sky here at the top. But don't paint over the white building, right? The clouds don't look puffy enough, so now I'm going to wash my brush very thoroughly and use clean water to paint the area where the clouds are more gray. So when we paint the gray later on, the gray is going to spread on the wet surface, hopefully to produce the puffy, soft clouds, and here as well. and maybe some here. Don't paint over the building. So before the paper is dry, quickly mix a light wash of ultramarine and burnt sienna. Don't mix the colors too completely, all right? For the darker clouds, maybe you want to mix more paint. So here I've used more ultramarine, it looks a bit more blue. I need to add more burnt sienna to make this more gray in. If you did not wet the area here properly, for example here it's not wet, you can see the sharp edge. And also the areas here, you can see all these sharp edges, they don't look much like clouds. So painting the sky like this with sharp edges, it's a very stylized type of look. While the sky or the surface is still wet, while the clouds are still wet, let's try and pick up or soften the edges, make the edges softer. And now comes the fun and exciting part, adding shadows. So for shadows, we are going to mix a darker mix of ultramarine and burnt sienna. Try not to mix the paint completely, the colors completely on the palette. So I'm going to start out with a bit more ultramarine first and paint the cast shadow here just below the building. Make sure to have the sharp edge, and notice here I overlaid onto the windows. And this cast shadow will continue to the side of this building. Notice this color, it's looking quite flat because I mixed the colors too completely. So while the wash is still wet, I'm going to charge in some extra ultramarine to shift the shadow more towards blue. And I can add some burnt sienna to shift the shadow back to more gray. So this whole area here on the side of the building, it's going to be in this shadow color. So I can paint it all the way down. And this signboard here, the side of this signboard is in shadow. There is cast shadow down the side of this road sign here. And all this is in shadow. The cast shadow on the sign here on this sketch is not that obvious, so I want to mix a bit more paint, ultramarine and burnt sienna to make that cast shadow more obvious. Alright, let me try and fade the color. This seems to be too dark now. Alright, this should work, so when this is dry later on, it should dry lighter. And now let's paint the shadows on the ground here, and this shadow here. And this person seems to be in shadow, so let's just paint him in shadow. I can use the same shadow color to paint this gray building. And I can use again the same shadow color to paint all these people here. And background, all these areas are going to be painted black later on. Don't paint over the truck because it's in light, it's under the sunlight. So just look for all the areas that are under the shadow and paint the shadows for them. So this shelter is casting shadow here. Some shadows here and here as well. This whole area here is going to be black later on. While waiting for the paint to dry, let's work on other areas first. Let's use colored pencils to draw this street sign. There is some blue here. So little details like this would be very difficult to paint with watercolor. I can also use the red here to draw over the details on this yellow building. Or you can actually use the Posca marker. This building here has an orange or a red roof, so I'm going to use this red color and maybe mix it with some orange. You can also use watercolor to paint this. Little details on this sign. Using this brown color pencil, I'm going to draw some details for the windows. Now this does not look exactly as the photo, so I'm using my own artistic interpretation for the windows here. This whole area is already dry, so we can use the white gel pen to draw the windows. And I'm going to separate this area here into different sections first. This will be the top floor, this will be the second floor, and the other floor that is lower. There is this signboard hanging on the side here, so I want to draw that signboard. And the line will continue here and here. So for the windows, yep, I'm just going to draw them like that. Let's continue with the windows on this floor. And we can add some details here and there. Seems to be another signboard here. For the windows here, I can see more white, so instead of the white gel pen this time around, I'm going to draw the windows with this Posca marker. If it's not white enough, you can consider using gouache or draw or paint on this a second time using the Posca markers. So I just realized I need to paint the side of this building with shadow as well, because the light source is coming from the left side. So let's paint this shadow area carefully. This is the same ultramarine and burnt sienna mix from earlier. I think it covered the details in the background a bit too much, so let me try and paint again. Now when you do corrections, it's going to affect your original work, so it's best to get it right the first time around, otherwise it's not going to look as nice. So earlier on the mix was too dark, so this time let's see if I can mix a lighter color over it. Still doesn't look as good, but I'm going to leave this as it is, because if I'm going to make any more corrections, it's going to look even worse. Next, we are going to paint the blacks. For blacks, we can mix phthalo blue with a warm red. This is phthalo blue mixed with a warm red. So this color is, as you can see, it's very dark. So I'm using this color basically to paint all the areas that are supposed to be close to black. You can see the warm red that I've used there. So when painting the black shapes, make sure to get the shapes correct. I can paint this area much darker as well. So many of the areas here underneath the first floor, they are close to black. The windscreen, the side mirrors of the vehicles, they are also close to, they also look like black. The wheels, definitely black. Bottom of the vehicle, sometimes they appear as black as well. I can use this black to paint the shape of this person that's walking. And I'm going to paint the background here, the shops here with black. Now I'm going to paint this whole area here. Earlier on I drew the railings on the van with pencil, but now I'm going to paint over because I think it's better to have white gel pen over the black rather than have pencil over the black. So let's paint all this area. Now when you're painting, please bear in mind to make sure that all the shapes are recognizable. So when you're painting the vehicle, paint in such a way that this truck here, it's recognizable. This person standing here, it's recognizable. This area here is also black. And yep, definitely here. And here. Most of the time, the bottom of the vehicles will be black. Using the same black, now I can add little details to the windows here. Now you can just look around your sketch and add details to where there should be details, or use the color pencils to color areas that you had missed out earlier. I want to color the lamps here with this color, the street lamps here. Remember the colorful flag, so let's color the flag with crayon. This crayon, it's not opaque enough, so maybe you may want to use Posca markers instead. This is definitely not opaque enough. But anyway, as mentioned many times in this course, it's all about experimentation with mixed media, about finding out the limitations of the media that you use. Let me add some dots on the ground for texture. Maybe use this color to paint the vehicles in the background. There are some yellow road markings, so I want to use this. Let's use the yellow Posca markers instead, because the crayon is not that opaque. So let's draw the street markings with Posca markers instead of the crayons. So this is more opaque compared to the crayons. And we have the markings here as well. I left out the roof here. So this whole area here should be much darker. I can use white gel pen to add some details. And lastly, remember to write the date of the sketch so that you can refer to it in the future. With mixed media art, there are a lot more supplies. Unlike watercolor, where you just have to bring watercolor and watercolor brush, with mixed media you have to bring a lot more supplies. And with urban sketching, it can be a bit inconvenient because with all the supplies you have to find some space to actually put them or lay them down. So my suggestion is to look at the supplies that you use most frequently and bring those instead of everything. Here's a closer look at the sketch. I can still add some more details or some more colors to areas that I've left out. I can use the white gel pen now to draw the railings on the side of this vehicle, this truck. The ink is not coming out right, so let me just draw a bit slower to help with the ink flow. So now you can see the contrast, it's much better, white against dark. And I can use this same white gel pen to draw little dots like this to suggest lights in the shops. Maybe some signs here. And now let's draw some hanging decorations. So the wires or cables that go from this building will start here and end somewhere here behind the flag. So let's just draw that with this colored pencils. Make sure you have the cable go down like this because of gravity. And we have this cable here that connects to this gray building behind. For the decorations, I'll be drawing them with this red Posca markers. So some are big and some are small. These are the small ones and these are the big ones. So you can see the contrast with red on red, it's not that obvious. Later on we will paint some white within the red. And now using the white Posca marker, we will add the white within the red. Let's add some details on the decorations, the hanging decorations. Adding the hanging decoration in front of the building really helps create that illusion of depth. So whenever you are sketching, try to think about overlapping elements, think about the foreground and background. Alright, so this is the completed sketch. Now, if you are not pleased or satisfied with your sketch, doesn't matter. Focus on the fun that you had when you were creating the art. And definitely get more practice. The more you draw, the more comfortable you will be with your materials, with your tools. The more familiar with your tools, the more comfortable you will be when it comes to sketching, and your work will look more confident and look better. The more you draw, the better you will get. Here's a close-up on the sketch. Now when painting shadows, try to create a strong shadow shape. For example, we have this shadow shape here that continues to the side of the building. We also have this angled shadow here that sort of blends into the side of the building as well. Generally speaking, for textured elements or subjects like trees, I try to draw them with colored pencils or crayons to create the texture. But for flat surfaces, I tend to use just watercolor. But sometimes I like to switch things around just to test, to see how different the effect will look when you switch different media. So these are the simplified shop houses on the right side. Try to draw the big shapes first and then draw the details later on. And when you don't have space left to draw the details, just leave the details out. That's how you can simplify a very complicated sketch. If you guys want to take a closer look at this sketch, you can download the scan that I have provided.